Indian Military Review and the Centre for Joint Warfare Studies organised a webinar and virtual expo on digitisation and networking in the armed forces on 21 to 24 November 2020. The sessions included communication networks of the Army, Navy and Air Force and interoperability, network-centric warfare and how they are undertaken by each service, C4ISR, including the naval experience, the Army's use of UAVs and beyond visual range operations, decision support systems, particularly communication to weapon systems and identifying friend and foe, information, data and big data challenges including information sharing and managing information overload, space domination and satellites by officers from the Defense Space Agency and DIPAC, and new technologies which included artificial intelligence, 5G and Internet of Things.
Thank you, Air Marshal Anil Chopra sir. Thank you for always supporting Center for Joint Warfare Studies. You've been a backbone and you always supported us with your articles, with the inputs, and your many contributions to our webinars and seminars. And we look forward to this continued support. And for this session, without much ado, I think Air Marshal Anil Chopra is too tall a figure, too well-known a figure for me to introduce him. So I will not even try that, I will not even attempt that. But we all know him very well. We all read with great interest what he writes. We all listen to him whenever he says something, and we watch him quite often. Over to you, sir.
Post-lunch session on day 2 of the seminar on digitization and networking in the Indian Armed Forces. Thank you, General Arora, also for inviting me to chair this panel. The subject for this session is session number 7, is space domination and satellites. We all know that aerospace is where the action is, and he who controls the aerospace actually controls the planet. Noted strategist and air power votary Zhu He had said, "Victory smiles upon those who anticipate the change in character of war and not upon those who wait to adapt themselves after the change has occurred." When the British were dominating the seas, they ruled the world, and Americans have been dominating the air and space, and therefore they are been dominating the last half century, and space is now the fourth medium of all military operations. And dominating position will belong to those who gain supremacy in outer space. All major powers, USA, Russia, China, to no less extent India, moving aggressively into this area, and I'm very proud that India is doing fairly well. Militarization of space is despite many treaties, is a reality. Control and denial of space-based assets is a key part of Chinese People Liberation Army doctrine. There is currently no war in space, but many experts believe that war in space is now more or less imminent. I feel extremely privileged to chair a panel of serving domain experts. Commodore Prem Chand, he's been an instructor for me on MiG-23 many years back of Defense Space Agency, and he's going to talk about requirements of robust space situational awareness. Wing Commander S. Pavan, Space-Based Navigation Communications and ISR, and Colonel Rajneesh Ralli from DIPAC, I presume, emerging space technologies for military applications. With this little background, may I now request Commodore Prem Chand to be the first speaker and kindly take over.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, sir. I think it made my job much easier, as usual, sir. Today's topic is the requirement for robust space situational awareness. I'll cover this under the following heads. What is SSA? the need for SSA, the requirement for India for robust space situational awareness, the way forward of how to go about doing this, and finally I'll conclude and take on any questions that you might have. As far as space situational awareness is concerned, I'll just show you a video which happened on January of 11th when ASAT was tested by China. You will realize on the 11th of February 2007 from Xichang, space launch happened. At exactly about 14 seconds, you saw that the ASAT was shot and it had gone and intercepted the Neptune 1C. You will see the debris floating around, and you will see in about another 20 odd seconds the International Space Station goes close to this debris for about 6 miles. In space terms, you will appreciate 6 miles is hardly any distance. Total of 2,800 odd debris was found, and about 35,000 pieces are still existing. This is how the ISS has gone through the space debris. Shown here are the satellites in green and the debris in red. And further you will see this is how the space appears as far as the debris and other space objects are concerned. It might not be immediately a cause for concern. However, in future you will find it becoming an issue. But what is the space technology benefits that we accrue? It is important in aviation, maritime and land transportation, urbanization, mapping and surveying, in human health and disaster management, food security and sustainable agriculture, environmental monitoring and natural resource management, and most of all, communication and entertainment. The very reason this webinar is happening can be contributed to the spin-off of space. As far as military is concerned, the benefits that we accrue are in the region of intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, communication in the PNT function, targeting, missile warning and weather. The Union of Concerned Scientists, UCS, has catalogued the available satellites, and at present, this is I'm taking on 1st of September 2020. The catalog shows 2,787 active satellites, out of which 2,032 are in LEO. In GEO, we have about 560 satellites. In medium Earth orbit, we have 137. In elliptical orbits, we have 58 satellites. The ESA reports, the European Space Agency reports, a greater than 10 centimeter objects in space are in the region of about 29,000, and about 6,70,000 space debris less than 1 centimeter. The commercial operators who are actually proliferating the space at present are SpaceX. Every alternate day is launching about 60 satellites for Starlink. OneLink is just given, with the UK already procuring OneLink with Bharti Mittal also participating 45% of equity. This is going to be up and running, and Amazon Project Kuiper is going to come up in a big way. Therefore, the McKinsey report predicts 50,000 active satellites in about a decade's time from now. This is just the active satellites, gentlemen. It's going to be the other boosters and other things are only going to increase in number. Also, the satellite collision that happened to the Iridium and Cosmos in the event which happened in 2009, I will just show you that video as well, which will also go to prove what happens when that collision. This was way back in 2009 when the satellite numbers were far too few. Iridium 33 in Cosmos. This happened sometime on the 10th of February 2009. That's the debris. Once again, from a different view, the collision happens. This is of the derelict Russian military Cosmos 225, Iridium 33. Both communication satellites on the LEO, 789 kilometers above Earth. there are 2,000 pieces of greater than 10 centimeters that were formed. The same photograph coming back, see the number of pre-existing space objects and the new debris which was created because of this collision. So the main reason for this, as brought out by the experts, they couldn't actually attribute to what was the issue, why this happened, but however, lack of data and tools available to avoid major accidents was one of the major reasons that was attributed for this collision. Additionally, the two-line elements that is given by NORAD, which is the North American Aerospace Defense Command, that are grossly inadequate to prevent such incidents. Incidentally, ISRO heavily depends on this NORAD data for our launch and other functions, which I'll cover slightly later. So what is space situational awareness? The European Space Agency defines it as a system which provides comprehensive knowledge of the population of space objects, of existing threats and risks, and of the space environment. In this, I'd like to bring your attention to, it only talks about knowledge of population of space objects and nothing more than that. A better qualifying definition of the space situational awareness is as indicated. This refers to the capability of detecting and tracking man-made and natural threats, predicting and assessing the risks involved, and providing services enabling the implementation of appropriate mitigation. I repeat, mitigation measures aiming at protecting space and ground assets. This is an over-encompassing space situational awareness definition. But what is the need for this SST? Can be used for debris tracking, collision avoidance, prediction of threats from asteroids and meteorites, monitoring threats from space weather and prediction of space weather conditions, satellite anomaly detection, attribution, and intentional threats. I'll show this in other different slides. What are the threats to space assets? Could be cause of natural phenomena like space weather, impact of meteorites and asteroids, accidental like the collision we saw between Cosmos 2251 and Iridium-33, which is a chance case, but it can also be intentional, which could be because of kinetic, non-kinetic, directed energy weapons, or because of cyber threat. So what are India's space security needs? The challenges of space-based surveillance at present are, it cannot be denied to an adversary, unlike air, land, or sea. This place, when you launch a satellite, it has the capability, if it is on LEO or MEO, to go over every part of the globe, and you really can't avoid or you can't really deny that particular service to the adversary. It provides an opportunity, however, it has also a flip side. It also provides an opportunity to our own elements. Preponderance, revisit, depth of detail, and resolution are the prerequisites, and technology availability will go a long way in enhancing this particular or overcoming this challenge of the space-based surveillance. But space-based surveillance is just one aspect. Space situational awareness, like the definition mentioned, already covers the mitigation factors as well. So the cross-domain capabilities that the satellite has, or what I can call as the dual utilization satellites. I really can't attribute to, it can do both a normal imaging as well as it can be used for something else. Those are the satellites that we need to watch out for. The platform security of ours is a very, very important factor that we need to take care of. ASAT can be of any form. Kinetic kill weapon is just one form of ASAT, which is generally misunderstood. ASAT encompasses all the four other details that I brought out in earlier slide. So what is the requirement of the robust SST? Space is one of the domains that carries a paradox. It is one both highly open and welcoming to everyone, and at the same time it is exclusive and strongly influenced by a few countries. Every country on earth is a spacefaring nation. If I can say that, 181 countries are utilizing space in one way or the other out of the total of 206. However, this does not mean that all countries enjoy equal access to the benefits of space. Both economically and militarily, our dependence on space assets is undeniable. Strategic environment will become increasingly congested, contested, and competitive. Today's space systems and their supporting infrastructure face a range of man-made threats that may deny, degrade, deceive, disrupt, or destroy our assets in space. The potential adversaries are seeking to exploit perceived space vulnerabilities. More nation and non-state actors are developing counter-space capabilities. They're actually proliferating as we even speak as of now. Threats to Indian space systems and challenges to the stability and security of space environment will only increase. Having seen this, let us see where exactly we are going to use SSA. For satellite launch, as of now, ISRO, which is our main partner who are launching our satellites, use TLE data of NORAD, which I already brought out, is grossly inadequate. It also provides collision avoidance analysis, also known as COLA. For orbit management and station keeping, every time there is an orbital maneuver that is carried out by Defense Satellite Control Center, or for that matter ISRO in ISTRAC, where they keep the satellite in the correct orbit, which is called the station keeping as well. Also, when there is an asteroid or a meteor, which there is a kind of an indication, they do those maneuvers to keep the satellite safe. All this needs SSA. And safety of satellite, be it natural cause or artificial, as I brought out previously, also need us to have adequate space situational awareness. It is something like a situational awareness that we often refer to in the aviation parlance. Therefore, the SSA can be achieved through detection when we have a radar, optical or RF sensor. We need cataloging, which is the most important function as far as SSA is concerned, for generation of TLE, which is dependable, and predicting trajectory determination and conjunction analysis is based on the prediction analysis of the SSA. So the components of SSA are data collection from the various sensors that I just brought out, the data fusion, which is the most important factor. We have data from various sources, however, they have to be fused to form an integrated space situational awareness picture. We need to analyze what this picture is depicting. Thereafter, a decision has to be made and it has to be disseminated. As far as the SSA architecture is concerned, this is what we have proposed. We talk about radar sensors, optical sensors, RF sensors. They all come in, and the different sensors, they all amalgamated to one comprehensive space situational awareness picture, which will be displayed in the Space Operations Center, and various users can use it. But all this can be possible only when you digitize and network it, which is also the main reason why we are in this particular webinar. The valuable component of SSA is a highly accurate catalog, as already brought out. If you do not have information about what's in space, where it has been, where it was last detected, or the intent of that particular satellite or dual use satellite, then the best of algorithms, gentlemen, and AI won't help. But an SSA catalog isn't just a static unit. It needs constant refreshing with new track data and correlation checks. All this can be achieved only when you integrate, digitize, and network the available resources. Further on, accuracy of the orbital data products of the SSA are affected by sensors collecting the data. The efficacy of the sensors is the most important factor. It is something like your rubbish in, rubbish out of a computer, something similar. If you have a good sensor, it will give you good results. The knowledge of the space environment is a very, very important factor. Number of space objects to be monitored are only increasing in numbers. The knowledge and control of errors in the sensor network will go in a long way to adequately give us an orbital data product of SSA and available computing resources. All this again brings us to the same point of integration, digitization, and networking of the available orbital data. What do we have at present? The current SSA capability that India possesses is got, like I said, a TLE data or a COLA from the TLE data that we have got from NORAD, which exactly is used for prior launch to identify threats during the ascent and the orbital phase. Then we have what is known as SOPA, which is called the Space Object Proximity Analysis, where collision probability computation is used for this particular SOPA is used. And thereafter, we have re-entry predictions for space debris modeling. But India uses TLE. Once again, I reiterate that India uses TLE from NORAD data, which is not real time, and it is basically 6 hours, 12 hours, depending on when the NORAD puts up its data. We do have mathematical modeling in Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in Thiruvananthapuram, but gentlemen, that's just a mathematical modeling. There have been times when we have been grossly out, as I have learned over a period of time. So what is the way forward? Cooperation and collaboration with our friendly foreign countries is one of the most important ways. Gentlemen, I would like to, ladies and gentlemen, if there are ladies listening, There are a lot of areas where we have to collaborate with a friendly foreign country, especially region being that this is a very, very costly affair. SSA from one country is just not possible. Therefore, this collaboration and cooperation effort, especially when the 2+2 has just happened and we are in good sync with a lot of countries which are leading spacefaring nations, be it Russia, be it US, be it France. We need to kind of utilize these things to cooperate and collaborate in the field of SSA. And Indian SSA program, by connecting the existing national ground radars, lot of agencies have got different radars, telescopes. We need to bring them under one architecture and as a single network. In a later step, maybe we can think about improvement in harnessing the private entities and also build up on our own radars, optical or RF sensors. And that would provide greater interagency exchange of information and intelligence sharing. Interoperable systems are the way forward, and therefore all this has to be done under the garb of integration, digitization and networking. The need, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, is that augment current SSA capabilities. This is just a three-pronged approach that I've suggested. We need to augment current SSA capabilities that is already existing in the country. For example, the MOTR is available with the ISRO. MOTR is Mobile Optical Tracking Radar. Through cooperation and collaboration with FSCs. And the second phase should be harnessing the capabilities of private industry and amateur astronomer community in India for catalog building. The reiteration is the catalog building, which is a requirement for SSA. And finally, build combination of dedicated ground-based and space-based sensors. Finally, to conclude, I just have this to say, space, like the Air Marshal had brought out, is a future warfare domain. It just cannot be wished away. It is going to be contested, congested and competitive. The space weapons proliferation that the Air Marshal brought out is here to stay. And in the name of the dual-use satellites, a lot of things are already happening. There is a need to shift our focus from surveillance, just surveillance, to the space situational awareness requirement. And this can be done by integration, digitization and networking. And therefore, the first step is building of a robust SSA. Jai Hind, sir, I have finished. Ready to put any questions or as the chair feels.
Thank you, Commodore Prem, for a very, very clear understanding of the robust space situational awareness that's required with such large number of, as you said, 50,000 active satellites in the coming years, and the need for tracking, assessing risk, threat assessments, and mitigating it, and having the appropriate asset capabilities. And you covered the entire subject in great detail. And I will sum up the whole, thing at the end. Now, I will next request Wing Commander S. Pavan, who speak on space-based navigation, communication, and ISRs. Over to Wing Commander Pavan.
Yes, sir. Under space domination and satellites, my topic of presentation would be on space-based communication, space-based navigation, and space-based ISR. I'll touch upon the different classifications of these three categories and what are all our limitations and what should be our focus and way forward. Moving on to space-based communication. The communication, especially SATCOM communication, can be classified based on orbit, based on the frequency of operation and the services. Based on the orbit, mostly what we are presently having is through geostationary orbit, and Russia uses small near orbit for their geo-based communication. And there are LEO-based constellations like Iridium, which is also being used for SATCOM applications. From the perspective of frequency of operation, mostly UHF, L-band and S-band frequencies are used by strategic fraternity, whereas C and KU band frequency ranges are being exploited by both strategic as well as civil user community. And over and above, Ka and higher frequencies are being used by both strategic as well as civil forces, civil users. Moving on to the services, the SATCOM services can be classified into three different types. One is broadcast SATCOM service. This is nothing but our DTH services like Tata Sky, similar to that. It is one way. broadcasting and which multiple user terminals hooked onto it. The second category is mobile SATCOM service, which is basically on the move SATCOM terminals gets hooked onto a geostationary satellite and the communication it establishes. And mostly we have seen the fixed SATCOM services, especially the banking sector, and even for our strategic applications also we use end user terminal getting connected, static networks are getting hooked on to this FSS through FSS to their respective hubs. Now, a comparison of what we have and what others have is as flashed. Here, at present, we are exploiting only geostationary orbit, whereas countries like US, China, and Russia are using both GEO as well as LEO constellation. So, in terms of frequency, we are currently limited to S-band, C-band, Ku-band, with a limited exploration in Ka-band and UHF frequency. Whereas the other spacefaring nations are amply exploiting entire frequency spectrum, and they are already the work in progress towards moving on to higher frequency band. And in terms of services, India is using exploiting all the three services, and especially MSS services, mostly strategic services are using. And whereas the three services are exploited all over the world, through this spacefaring nations. And coming to the indigenized RF baseband and technology, we are very limited. We presently we rely only on imported baseband and RF technologies, though we have very limited in-house development capabilities as compared to the other spacefaring nations. And one of the limitation is that our space segment is currently being offered by ISRO, whereas for other spacefaring nations, they have got both government as well as private players. So this brings to what's our limitation. In terms of limitation, basically as of now, we have got very limited launch capability of up to 4-ton launch capacity, beyond which we don't have the launch pad capacity within our country to launch heavy satellites. And most of our satellite footprint is limited only to Indian region and including our island region. And presently we rely only on ISRO, so we lack alternatives in terms of offering SATCOM services. Though there are private players, they are based outside the country, and so there is lack of in-house alternatives. And in terms of technology, as I said, we have very limited baseband and RF technology. And moving on to the future, there are interference issues which are likely to come up post-operationalization of this 5G and IMT services. So there needs to be a option to have a coexistence and co-utilization of this available frequencies, which is one of the scarce resource. And in terms of infrastructure for controlling, especially if we are not having any LEO-based constellation because of lack of infrastructure to control a huge number of constellation of communication satellites. So presently, the geostationary satellites are being controlled through the ISRO facility, master control facility at Hassan. So to overcome these limitations, what could be the way forward in terms of SATCOM is we should have a mix of both the geostationary as well as LEO-based constellation, so that LEO-based constellation helps us in using high data rate applications, as well as it will reduce much of latency. And we should think about having an extended satellite footprint for all our applications. This is with respect to our footprint falling only over Indian and Indian island region. So if we have to conduct some operations, we need to have extended satellite footprint. And our focus should be on launch on demand with ISRO under progress of developing a small satellite launch vehicle. We should have a launch on demand capability with us for SATCOM applications as well. And we should think of going towards higher frequency ranges, which enhances the bandwidth as well as the data rate capability for using high data rate applications we should think of operating, and our technology should be focused towards developing RF components and baseband components for operating at higher frequency ranges. And we should, to realize this, we need to have an involvement of a mix of government-owned, company-operated, public-private partnership, so that we can achieve this in-house R&D for baseband RF technology, and as well as whatever limitations what I have mentioned. This is due to we are relying only on ISRO. If we have a good mixed government to company-operated private player participation, we could achieve all these limitations to our advantage. And finally, we should have heavy launch capability for placing heavier satellites in geostationary orbit to meet our communication requirements. Now, moving on to space-based navigation. Space-based navigation can be categorized into three different types. One is GNSS, which is Global Navigation Satcom Service, Satellite Service. Another one is Regional Navigation Satellite Service, and the third one is Space-based Augmented System. In this global navigation, we have got our GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, and Compass, which is nothing but Beidou 3. And under regional navigation, we have NAVIC, which is also called as the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. And then we have got Quasi-Zenith Satellite System of Japan, and Beidou, which has evolved into a global navigation satellite system. And then under satellite-based augmented system, we have got WAAS, which is a GPS augmentation in US region, and European Geo-National Overlay Satellite Service, which is for the Russian GLONASS augmented system. And for our Indian region, we have got Gagan, which is an augmentation of GPS in our Indian region. Basically, the flashed are the operating frequency ranges of this navigation satellites. As you can see, mostly the navigation satellites operate in L-band, and one marked difference is our NAVIC makes use of both L-band as well as S-band. Presently, it is operating in L5 and S-band of the spectrum. So coming to this global navigation system, as you can see, the GPS has got 6 orbits, and GLONASS has got 4 orbits, and Galileo has got 6 orbits, and Beidou is a mixture of both medium earth orbit as well as geostationary and inclined geostationary orbit constellation. Moving on to regional navigation system, I'll touch upon NAVIC. Our NAVIC has got 7 satellite constellation. In this, we have got 3 satellites in geostationary orbit and 4 satellites in geosynchronous orbit. This covers about 1,500 kilometers of area surrounding Indian region, and this satellite gives will give an accuracy of about 10 meters. With additional extended satellite constellation, which we are planning for about 4 more. With that, our constellation is likely to extend to 11. With that, our accuracy and in terms of timing as well as position is likely to be increased in near future. Moving on to Gagan. Gagan is basically GPS aided geo-augmented navigation satellite system. In this, we whatever the GPS errors which we get in Indian region is corrected using reference station, and then it is relayed through a geostationary satellite to a Gagan receiver deployed on an aircraft or whatever vehicles or whatever user receiver. So for this, there are 15 reference stations which are deployed all over India, with the main uplink station at Bangalore, as you can see from the slide. So with this comparison of global navigation constellation, as you can see, GPS has got 31 satellites, which can give a 5-meter precision, and GLONASS has got a total of 24 satellites with 8 satellites per orbit, giving a precision of about 5 to 10 meters. Galileo has got about 40 satellites, which claims to give an accuracy of 1 meter for public and 1 centimeter for military applications. Whereas China, which is having Beidou, which is having satellites in all three different orbits, GSO, GEO, as well as in MEO orbit, is claimed to give accuracy of 10 meters for the public civil service and 10 centimeters for military applications. Whereas Indian IRNSS, which is operating in geostationary orbit, covering a radius of about 1500 kilometers, will be giving about 20 meters of accuracy in the civilian signal, whereas 10 meters is likely to be achieved for our military applications. This accuracy is likely to increase if we enhance our constellation to level. So what are all the advantages what we are having with our IRNSS is our IRNSS is having a peculiar advantage of having an S-band signal as well as compared to an L-band frequency. So this is advantage in terms of having IRNSS service in S-band, which gives a wider coverage. And with a limited constellation, it will be easier for us to maintain the satellite, and moreover, it is operating in geostationary orbit. So the amount of controlling required for maintaining the satellite position is very limited. And with the satellite operating in geostationary orbit, the life of the satellite can also be increased with the latest increase in the payload lifting capability through GSLV satellite. Presently, all the 7 IRNSS satellites were launched through PSLV launch vehicle. If we think of using GSLV, then the satellite life can also be increased. But coming to the limitations, we presently with 7 satellites, our accuracy is comparable as compared to the other global navigation satellite services. So to enhance this, we need to go for an extended constellation, and we are limited only to regional coverage. So the global coverage, if at all, if we have to have a global coverage, we need to think of having a constellation of in a medium Earth orbit of more than around 20 satellites. And presently, we are in the process of developing receivers. So the receiver development for varied application, not only with respect to handheld, we need to integrate these IRNSS receivers for varied platforms, high dynamic platforms. So the receiver realization is getting progress. So these are all the limitations which, if we can overcome, we can exploit versatile navigation satellite system for accurate, jam-resistant data to our forces to reach, target, or engage our enemy in air battle and neutralize the ground targets with precision. So for this, we need to realize and make sure that the receivers of different categories are available for all our weapon systems. Moving on to space-based ISR. So this space-based ISR can be classified based on its role. It can be classified into passive or active. And depending upon the sensors fitted on the satellite, we can categorize into an electro-optical ISR satellite, or IR, or a SAR, or a microwave, or multispectral or hyperspectral. And depending upon the purpose for which the satellite has been launched, based on that, we can categorize these ISR satellites into an Earth observation satellite, image intelligence, signal intelligence, which comprise of comment as well as ELINT, and then for weather monitoring. These are all the broad classifications of ISR satellites. So what are all the limitations for ISR satellites? One is the figure of merit. So the figure of merit is depending the following are the figure of merit. One is the sensor accuracy. Sensor accuracy varies from one sensor to another sensor. The revisit time of the satellite over the area of interest, the access duration of the area of interest, the resolution at which a sensor can capture a target. That is also one of a figure of our merit. And the access area, how much of area that sensor can cover over a single pass, that is also one of the figure of merit. And the number of constellations for getting a constant contiguous surveillance of that area, and then inclination and orbit and altitude of the satellite, all this forms the basic figure of merit. So all these are complementary, and one figure of merit may be a trade-off for another figure of merit. So these limitations we need to overcome to ensure ensure that our intended resolution of over a target of interest is achieved. Moving on to other limitations, we are limited with downlinking stations with very limited locations, and the processing and data analysis capability is also evolved with the advancement in artificial intelligence. So these are the limitations. If we can overcome, we may be able to extrapolate better data in terms of gathering information about our area of interest. And for a passive payload, the receiver sensitivity is one of the limitations, which if we can have a better sensitive receiver, we can achieve a good ISR data. For this, we need to have an all-weather 24/7 a multispectral or hyperspectral full spectrum capable resolution capability. And we should focus on tandem missions with 2 or more satellites so that we can get a demo of that area of interest or our target of interest, which will also help in carrying out our ISR activities. So towards this, we need a resilient and redundant ground infrastructure, and we should strive to get a near real-time imagery. Basically, our idea should be to have a persistent ISR, which reduces or shortens the sensor to shooter loop. So with that, sir, the additional focus area where we should focus is on, as rightly brought out by Air Commodore Prem Kumar, that space situational awareness, along with it space weather and debris information, and the capability for our defense and defensive as well as offensive operations in near and long term. In addition to space-based SATCOM capability, ISR and navigation, these 3 areas we should focus to have a robust space dominance. With this, I have concluded.
Thank you, Wing Commander Pavan, for covering the space-based navigation, communications, and ISR. You highlighted the limitations in terms of not having LEO constellations. You talked about the RF and baseband technologies limitations. You talked about private startups and small satellites. I will cover some of these when I sum up in the end. Heavy launch capability is another area which is very, very important. And when covering the navigation systems, the need for India to improve its accuracies, and ISR, you talked about its limitations and the issue about downlinking station limitations. Thank you, Wing Commander Pavan. Now we move to Colonel Rajneesh Ralli from DIPAC, talking about the emerging space technologies for military applications. Over to Colonel Ralli.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry for this faux pas, sir.
Yeah.
Permission to start, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, good afternoon, gentlemen. I thank St. George and the chair for giving me this opportunity to speak on the topic. The subject of my talk is emerging trends in space technology impacting military use of space domain. The KPMG report on space 2030 has made 30 predictions and basically deals with about 5 major issues. It talks about, firstly, humans living in space, working there, deep space exploration, which will enable us to mine on the moon as also on other spatial bodies, growing food in space. All industries will have a space business model. Space data will get commoditized and be available, and sustainability in space will benefit sustainability on Earth. The ecosystem required to fructify the predictions made by the KPMG report will be enabled by emerging technologies which would make it viable for sustained activities in space. There will be a shift of human activities to space, which will be accompanied by a clash of interests and conflicts between nations, and force the armed forces to prepare for space as an operational domain. With this as the background, I shall be covering my talk under the heads as shown. Why has space become important for military? The primary reason is national interests have expanded to the space domain, and almost everyone has a stake in space or space-based services. There is a proliferation of space-based support to military operations, which is now available to almost anyone and everyone, including even non-state actors. Counter capabilities to ballistic missiles with NBC risks and the newly introduced hypersonic weapons will have to come from assets based in space. This kind of proliferation and expansion in the use of space-based assets make it a contested zone, necessitating both offensive and defensive measures. A overview of the military space domain operations shown on the left column. The military space operations encompass space transportation, satellite operations, PNT, command control communications, ISR, environmental monitoring, space control, force application. I shall not be touching upon PNT and command control issues. That subject is pretty large by itself. Conduct of military space operations that we have seen in the previous slide are based on infrastructure which can be broadly divided into two, the ground segment and the space segment. We will take a look at the emerging technologies in these two segments. Firstly, coming on to emerging ground segment technologies. Firstly, again, the ground earth stations, which are established to communicate with space-based assets. In the present format, fixed antennas are used. Emerging technologies will facilitate direct downloading of data by frontline troops based on mobile stations, which need not be fixed. Also, presently we have satellites downlinking data in different frequencies for catering for different speeds and different payloads. Such an arrangement would necessitate installation of multiple antennas. However, with the injection or availability now of multi-band antenna, a single antenna will be able to download data from various types of satellites or big payloads, and this will obviate the need for multiple antenna, resulting in optimization of infrastructural costs. Recent launch by China about a week back of an experimental satellite with 6G technologies indicates the capability of high-speed data download, which would shift from the present Gbps to terabits per second. This again will contribute to availability of high-resolution imagery in almost real time at the field level. Use of a network of ground stations worldwide and geostationary satellites will also facilitate real-time download of data for ISR functions. Availability of mobile data reception stations based on ships, vehicles, and even man-packed stations will provide us the facility of flexibility to overcome the restrictions posed on fixed ground stations, which are fixed due to orbital dynamics. That is, only when a satellite is passing over a particular antenna can it download. However, these mobile receiving stations will facilitate availability of products directly where they are required in the time frame that we need it. Coming on to the field of data processing, the improvement of electronics, hardware and software, we are likely to see reduction in the processing time of data from a few hours to just a few minutes. This again will contribute to the timeliness of data availability. While data fusion of inputs from different sensors will help us overcome individual sensor limitations, as also present an integrated fused picture enabling better decision making. The most important innovation in the field of data processing would be the simultaneous availability of data in multiple formats available to be processed or used by high-end systems to mobile devices which would be held or used by troops on ground. Given the jump in the number of space assets, which was brought out by panelists before me, there's going to be a voluminous increase in data availability, which would be impossible to process manually. Artificial intelligence will come in a big way to facilitate a number of functions related to analyzing this certain mundane task, leaving the image analyst free for their specialist task of analyzing or generating imagery intelligence. A major benefit of the software would be to prepare 3D models, very accurate, precise 3D models, which will be of immense use in carrying out special operations, terrain familiarization, and would even facilitate deployment of high-tech weapons, targeting, and troop deployment. For telemetry tracking and commanding function, use of a worldwide network of ground stations and geostationary satellites will facilitate cutting down the demand to delivery cycle, which presently ranges from 12 to 24 hours to just about 2 to 3 hours. Towards this end, a US-based commercial company, Capella, has recently declared that it will be able to carry out this complete cycle from demand of imaging to the imaging, processing, and making available a product to the consumer within 90 minutes with a 36 satellite constellation. Using the same technology, wherein one could be able to download data, it will also be possible to execute real-time maneuvering of satellites as a defensive measure, as also reposition satellites to meet operational requirements. On the launch front, ship and aircraft-based launch of satellites will help us in overcoming technical restrictions and delays of launching from geographically fixed locations. No longer will countries be based because of their geographical location in carrying out launches of satellites. The ships and aircraft-based launch will give flexibility to anyone and everyone to carry out launches as required. The launch on demand technology will give us the capability of launching satellites within 24 hours of decision making, which will be a great operational enhancer, and the reusable launch vehicles, which Chinese and the US have already been starting to use, as well as in the commercial side, Elon Musk has been doing it, will ensure cost cutting in setting up of space assets. Having seen ground segment technologies, we'll now take a look at space segment technologies. In the field of satellites, the major game changer has been small satellites, constellations of which will provide operational redundancy, system resilience, and reduce cost immensely. Less weight of these satellites will also facilitate capability to simultaneously launch a constellation of satellites. You could have about 8 to 9 satellites being launched in a given time, and just for example, we could have a SIGINT which requires about a constellation of 3, about 3 such constellations to be launched in a single particular launch. Talking about onboard propulsion systems, technology is moving from chemical propulsion systems to ion and electric-based propulsion systems. This will lead to an increase in satellite life while enhancing space maneuverability capability, which will make it easy to execute defensive measures, as also change orbits to meet operational requirements. Coming on to the payloads, miniaturization of electronic components, and consequently the payloads, satellite payloads, will give us a lot of options of having satellites with multiple payloads. Here the major payoff is likely to be in the field of artificial intelligence, which for its machine learning requires inputs from multiple sources, different payloads. If this is available, presently it is being done manually, which is very time consuming and not too precise. Satellites with multiple payloads will facilitate AI in a very big way. The second benefit would be in the field of maritime domain awareness, wherein the AIS payload, which is an automatic identification system, would be placed in almost each and every satellite. This payload weighs about just 2 to 3 kgs. The other most critical aspect in deciding satellite life is its ability to carry fuel. The demonstrations that the Americans gave about a year back about carrying out in-orbit refueling will lead to life extension, especially of the critical geostationary satellites. Now coming on to the onboard capabilities. Onboard processing in satellites has been shown in an experimental way by both the Americans and the Chinese. This will provide us with processed data to be downloaded, ready for use, and downloaded at the frontline level. Onboard queuing of EO satellites, just as an example, by the SAR satellites will facilitate having a more efficient imaging carried out by the EO satellites. A SAR satellite flying about a minute or two ahead would be able to guide the EO, that's the electro-optical satellite, where to carry out imaging, avoiding any cloudy areas where the effort would be wasted. Of major criticality are the advances in the AOCS system. For example, with an agility of just about 20 to 30 degrees of a satellite, I would need, or we would need, a 4 to 5 satellite constellation to achieve a revisit of 1 day. With the increase in satellite agility to about 60 degrees, just 1 to 2 satellites will be able to achieve a revisit of 1 day. In the field of data relay, there is a lot being done for laser-based inter-satellite communication. Was in news about yesterday or today, where there's an Indo-Israeli cooperation also going on in this field. This will facilitate issues as has been shown on the slide. Coming on to SSA, that has already been spoken of, but here the emerging technology will facilitate and provide very high resolution ground and space-based telescopes and radars. This would give us a better overall picture, facilitating better decision making. Of particular interest is ability to monitor launch sites with these very high resolution telescopes based in space, which I believe will also be able to discern the warheads that are being launched, will have major payoffs as far as the operational military domain goes. Offensive defensive capabilities covering right from kinetic weapons to communication denial means are being progressed in very big way both by the Chinese and the US, and they are already known to be establishing units with offensive capabilities in the space domain. Defensive capabilities, to my mind, will be based basically on maneuvering capabilities to avoid any offensive measures, whereas the quantum communication and cyber-proofing technologies will help protect against any such offensive attacks by the adversaries. With this, I come to the takeaways. The major takeaways are space will be fundamental to modern life, and militarily, space will transform from a combat support role to a war-fighting domain in the times to come. If we look specifically at the military space domain, we will have small satellite constellations with multiple payloads, and there will be a need for offensive and defensive measures to retain ability to use the space domain while denying the same to our adversaries. And to support this activity, there would be a need to exploit artificial intelligence and provide dedicated specialized manpower for space operations. Thank you, sir. I have finished.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Colonel Ramesh, for a very enlightening talk. You talked about the space technologies. You predicted about what will happen in 1330. Very interesting, very enlightening. space for military use, real estate and infrastructure, the direct support to the frontline troops and how the capability will change, launch of satellites from ships and aircraft. You talked about reusable launch, which we have to also get into. The Americans and Chinese already in it. Increased satellite life through better technologies in orbit, refueling, and satellite payloads, miniaturization, and multiple payloads on each satellite. You also talked about onboard technologies, revisit times, high resolution pictures, kinetic weapons, etc., etc. Fantastic, a great talk. In fact, all three were outstanding. I'm a great believer of what's happening in space, and I read and write a lot about space, and therefore, with the permission of General Bhatia, I'm going to take 5, 7, 8 minutes to give my views on what I think. Space has changed our lives. Many non-weapon space enablers, our whole life has changed by satellite-based communications, GPS, etc. The military use of space for command control, computers, intelligence, surveillance, research, reconnaissance, all has been covered by the speakers, and for network-centric warfare. Satellites also used to provide early warning missile launches, locate nuclear detonation, GPS systems, facilitate accurate navigation and targeting by not only aircraft and ships, but smart bombs and cruise missiles. And then network-centric warfare also relies heavily on the use of high-speed satellite-enabled communications to improve real-time situational awareness, as has been covered by all the three speakers. Satellite imagery is also used by fighter bombers and cruise missiles for physical targeting. Now, as has been brought out that the Americans and the Russians were in the lead, but China has moved in very, very quickly, and they are investing one hell of a lot of money in space. They put a human in space in 2003, and they did the ASAT test in 2007, and they have now the 35 satellite global navigation system with such high accuracies as we have been just now told. All elements of the 100-ton Chinese permanent space station is also in place, and that should be fully operational by 2021. That's the coming year. Human expedition to moon is on the cards around 2025. Physical landing on the moon by a human. Missions to Mars and beyond are already planned and on. And China wants to create energy from space with an orbital solar power plant. China is also conceptualizing a crewed lunar base, studying possible space-based asset capability. Now, I also, as being a fighter pilot, I want to mention that although everybody seems to have done an ASAT test, but there are complexities of satellite intercepts are significant, because the tracking of satellite which you want to just through a point and do a test is a different thing, but tracking military satellites with inbuilt defensive measures like inclination change, among others, will not be so easy. The interceptor would have to predetermine the point of impact of a satellite which is traveling at a very high speed at heights of around maybe 800 kilometers or higher, and moving at 7.5 kilometers an hour or more. It's not going to be easy to intercept, and even if you intercept, there are standbys, there are complex constellations of satellites. There are some satellites which are flying at much higher altitudes, which are operating at maybe 20,000, 36,000, some of these geostationary satellites, and to hit them at those altitudes is even more complex. It's going to take time to travel. So therefore, these in-orbital systems that the USA and China and earlier Russia used to be working on, I remember during Soviet times, they have been working on, and the Americans are now talking of escort satellites. You from fighter escorts, now you're getting to escort satellites. So I'm happy that India is doing well in its space program. Though Chandrayaan-2 missed the landing by just 2 kilometers last year, but the attempt was laudable. And India plans an orbiter to Venus, Shukrayaan-1 in 2023. And greater space presence requires capabilities of launching heavy satellites which has been brought in briefly by two of the speakers. And there is a need for increasing the number of launches per year that we are currently doing by at least another 25 to 30%. I talk of some figures as I go along. Also, this ability to launch satellites at short notice. That means that higher readiness, whether they're small satellites or they are larger satellites, because larger numbers are available, both the launch vehicles and the satellites. And with advanced electronics and cyber capabilities, and as we develop kinetic and non-kinetic weapons to defend India's assets and interests in space, space-based military and counter-space operations will allow own use of space while denying the adversary the same. Space wars, which we used to see only on TV serials or in video games, are not here. It's a reality, and India is getting abreast to this reality. Now, as far as the launch and satellite capabilities are concerned, ISRO has used the heaviest rocket GSLV Mark III in June 2017, launched a 4-ton GSAT-19. But soon we understand that ISRO is going to have capability to launch 5,000 kg satellite payload. And ISRO has launched large, normally 350 foreign satellites belonging to some 35, 40 countries. India will send its first manned mission to space as per ISRO Chief Sivan by December 2021, and we hope that will be because the pilots, the cosmonauts, future cosmonauts, are already training in Russia. India's military application satellites currently about 15, 16 operational. Of course, these boys in uniform will know the figure much better with the spatial, spectral, and temporal resolution, which is going up. And we also have these SATs, which have been there for some time with the help of Israel. We had them in the Cartosats and the Armed Forces dedicated satellite for the Navy, GSAT 6 and 7, and then for the Air Force 7A, the Angry Bird, which is also used by the aviation side of the Indian Army, and it helps greatly the AFNet and the ground network that we have got, including the AEWNC. And so there is a significant amount of capability. I'm also happy that the DRDO and ISRO are working on laser-based weapon systems to destroy satellites, missiles, and ballistic missiles in booster phase itself. India's Defense Space Agency has come up a big way now. They did this war game last year in SpaceX, which had specialists both from the military and ISRO, and also some private think tanks. And this was the logical next step after anti-ballistic missile and ASAT capability has been already tested. And also, during this exercise, they looked at the threats that Beijing poses and where are the gaps that the Indian space program has to fill in, and what are the technologies that we need to strengthen for effective deterrence as the logical next step. The anti-space weaponization treaties, whole heap of them are there. There are many signatories, many are signatories but do not believe in it. In any case, USA has repeatedly said that they have the right to self-defense, and therefore the space treaties have their limitations. Come what may, every country in the world is now going to create an environment for space defense. The space command structures are now fairly well getting placed. The United States has a space command, which was under the Air Force earlier. Now it's gone into strategic command. And the Russian space forces are under their Air Force, and they're called the Aerospace Force now, that is why. And China has created their own Independent People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force. India now has the DSA, and we are hoping that one day we will have the space command. Now, a few points I want to make about the capability building attention that India needs to look at. As one of the speakers said, robust space situational awareness. I think that was Prem who said that. Capability with radars, opticals, lasers, tracking facilities. India will require a constellation of advanced communication satellites in geostationary orbit for carrying out vital C4 functions, and a constellation of military cluster of satellites for E-link and electro-optical and SAR and other functions, whether they are sun synchronous or otherwise. That technical part will be looked into. And a small satellite is a hot subject. It's they're required for hot standbys. Much smaller launchers are required for small satellites, and like you have these fighter aircraft on standby too, on operational readiness platforms. These launchers with these small satellites, a couple of them, could be launched. And as I said, that the capacity for India for heavy launch is the first, next critical. What actually heavy satellite is actually defined as anything above 5,400 kgs. And the use of ion propulsion, as briefly mentioned by somebody, for moving the satellites from GTO to GSO is another emerging trend. And this approach will allow the GSLV Mark II launches to launch the equivalents of an intermediate class GSO satellite, and GSLV Mark III launches can launch the equivalent of a heavy class satellite. So we are looking forward to some of these things. We are also looking forward to RNS, Indian Navigation System, space system, to also settle down and give us the better accuracies as the Chinese have already got. Now these small satellites was spoken about. Any satellite below 500 kgs is small, whether it's micro, nano, pico, femto, all kinds of names are given to these. But their cost is going to be low, and the world is already talking of new constellations of 1,000+ satellites. And the figures that were already given, the number of satellites which are physically already there are considerable. So there is going to be action. You perhaps require a policeman and a traffic light in space very, very soon. And yes, ISRO has also made efforts towards small satellites. We all know that Indian Mini Satellite 1 and Mini Satellite 2 have already been tried out, and they are below that 400 and 200 kg limits. Small satellites here I mentioned have defense applications, and one day they will be doing the kind of job that Predator type of UAVs are doing today. There was a brief mention of India's private technology startups. I'm happy to say that when we visit Bangalore, we come to know that there are a couple of these Indian, small technology private startups. Beatrix Aerospace, I remember. There was Dhruva Space, Kava Space, Agnikul Cosmos, and Astrogate Labs. A couple of these startups I remember having met during the Defense Expo earlier this year, and that's something which we need to encourage. I also feel that the national security complex, the entire setup at higher levels in the government, there is a need for reorganizing, restructuring, keeping this new space dynamic space-based C4ISR in mind. I think there is a need for looking at a new strategy for waging war and preserving peace at the highest level in the government. And so to just sum up, India has developed all the building blocks necessary to integrate an anti-satellite weapon system to neutralize hostile satellites, low Earth and polar orbits. India needs to have more early warning satellites to monitor ICBMs, and then we have to have ground-based systems, as was covered, based lasers to disable enemy satellites or destroy degrading attacking ICBMs. They also need to develop directed energy weapons. India one day needs a permanent space station. I am very strongly a proponent of that. The space-based systems have enabled dramatic improvements in military intelligence capabilities. More needs to be done, and in not so distant far future, wars will again be fought like Indian epics, and the future is all action. Time to invest in space is now. And it is time for me to wrap up this session, to thank the three speakers, excellent professionals. They've had beautiful presentations. And I request everybody to kindly, whosoever is present, to put your hands together for these three speakers. Thanks, St. Joe's, for having a session on such a relevant subject. I greatly enjoyed, and I'm going back very, very enlightened. Thank you, General Bhatia. Thank you, General Ravi.